Right, ladies and gentlemen, we have LEC playoffs after a beautiful break, so I'm going to remind you guys of what's going on with these teams. I want to highlight as well that 15-3 is going to be played. Mel will be enabled. I do think, for those who don't know, like Mel is in a state where she's quite strong. I think her biggest weakness is against artillery range, long range. There was a game of Mel that we played today where, we played against Syndra and Ezreal, and that could be like very, very tricky. Are you tired of browsers that just eat up your RAM and just no customization options at all? Do you feel trapped in a relationship with an old and slow browser because you've just used it for so long and all your bookmarks and settings and all that jazz is just all in that same place and it just feels so overwhelming to move on? Well, no worries. Opera GX has got you covered. You didn't install it. Boom, you use the link below. Easy peasy. You press the setting button. Even a bronze player could do this. Are you smarter than the bronze player? Show it. You scroll down, boom. You find the import bookmarks and settings button. You click it, choose your browser, import. You can select the items to import. Boom. All of a sudden, you're up to speed and your new life can begin. Now you can use all of the unique features, of course, of Opera GX. The first one that comes to mind is, of course, the Riot Corner. The Riot Corner is something you're going to unlock if you use one of the mods that are, of course, League of Legends related. You scroll down and all the info that you need in regards to any major event that's going on will be here. The last one, of course, was Worlds 2024. You see the calendar, you see all the matches, you can click them and watch them, and you'll be up to speed with anything that is going on, of course, in the global League landscape. You scroll down, you also see the co-streamers. Look at this handsome devil and this beautiful cat. You click this one, of course. I won't judge you. If you click anything else, maybe I will. Nevertheless, the GX store has a bunch of mods that you can, of course, use to customize your experience. Let me show you how easy it is. Renata Glass, one of my favorite champions, install mod. Let's see how this looks like. Simple press of a button. Boom, everything changes. New tab noise. Keyboard sounds. The beautiful background of Renata looking over Zone. If for some reason you want to mix and match and you want to make it your own, you can do so, of course, in the mod hub. You just press the interface, you pick and choose. You can do fonts, app icons, themes, wallpapers. You can do sounds, keyboard sounds, browser sounds, background music, anything to, of course, your liking, because Opera GX is truly your browser. So what are you waiting for? Make sure to use, of course, the link in the description below to support the channel and to, of course, also download Opera GX. It comes pre-packed with all of these League features. Make your browser truly, truly yours today. Thank you, Opera GX, for, of course, supporting this content. So Mel will be played. I think it will show up. Just be careful playing it against like long-range mages that people really, really like playing in this region, of course. I think in terms of scaling, she's super, super strong. And her W is very polarizing, but I can imagine that teams wouldn't want to blind pick it because mages are very good against her. Additionally, Fearless finally begins in Europe. We've had BO1s for the longest time with Fearless. And now, finally, we have best of 3 with Fearless, which, of course, is going to make a big difference. In terms of where I rank teams, in terms of the prep towards Fearless, I do think in terms of the teams that will suffer the most, I would say Team Heretics, Team BDS, and potentially the likes of Movistar Koi and then Giant X. I would say probably BDS and Team Heretics are the key ones. I do think that Team BDS as a team, they rely on having, of course, supportive junglers in Maokai and Sejuani. I think for Team Heretics, they're often drafting very scaling compositions. So I do think that this will be a little bit of a pain point for them. I mentioned Koi and Giants after the fact is because Koi, I do think that when Elioya is playing engage junglers like Vi, I do think that's central in regards to how they like to play. When they play Xin Zhao to do the early invades, the Vi, I wonder what the evolutions there will be. I also like Jojo Pyun on the majors so far. So I do think that Movistar, in terms of how they've drafted, if we just take a look at their history, I do think that they keep and maintain the same pattern in their wins. If we take a look at Koi here, there's a Kalista game that they lost against KC. Let's just look at their later variants. There's the Ambessa prior that is super, super high. This was a very poor week for Jojo Pune. Let's take a look more. Koi, they had the Koki, another round of Jace here as well with the Koki. There it is. And then the Koi, the final one that they lost here is just that in my mind, when I think of Koi, I think of Vi, Ambessa, melee support, mages mid. I feel like that's like the best winning recipe for Koi. So I'm curious to see how they kind of develop in the Fearless, because I do think that it's very easy to define how Koi likes to play. Easy doesn't mean bad, by the way. It's like Koi is very streamlined in their approach, and that could be a very good thing, because some of the other teams, could struggle in having things streamlined, right? So additionally, Giants, I do think that they do best when closer is playing also very supportive junglers. That's the common theme here, like the Sejuani, Maokais, the Vise. I do think that this is just the LEC kind of standard when it comes to junglers. While I think junglers like, for example, Skumond, Yike, and also even Razork like to play, can go a little bit deeper. But even a player like Razork, if we just take a look at what he's played in terms of his match history, take a look at this in their match history results. It's like we have Skarner, Maokai, Vi, Maokai, Vi, Maokai, Vi, Zyra. Right? Razork, we know him to be mechanically super, super good, but I do think that Maokai, Vi, these champions make coordinated games a lot easier to kind of set up. So I think this will be the most interesting evolution. I do think Ivan is a very, very interesting lock-in to have. Like, Ivan is also a very strong champion that should be played. But then again, this is still best of threes. Fearless is not going to be that heavy-handed. In terms of the rest of the things, in terms of best of threes, in my mind, where we land in terms of the matchups, I do think that the favorites are pretty damn clear. Fnatic, I think that they have the easiest match of the number 1 seed against Team Heretics. I think this should be an easy 2-0. I think that there is nothing the Team Heretics have offered that is better than Fnatic, what Fnatic have offered so far. Better mechanical skill, better team play, better drafting too. Team Heretics, the main strength of Team Heretic, they are a respectable lower-end team because they seem very, very aware of how good they are, right? That's a very, very good strength to have because they drafted a lot of scaling. They had these compositions surrounding Smolder, were willing to go late in the game. There's a steady progression that is respectable. I really like Flackhead on Draven, but I imagine that Draven is something that Fnatic would permaban because I think that that's where Flackhead looks just the most dangerous. So I think targeting the Draven makes a lot of sense. G2 versus GX. I think G2 also really kicked it into gear. I think the key thing for me, the key player for G2 so far in my mind is Broken Blade. If we take a look at Broken Blade and what he has played so far, in all of their victories, as far as I remember, he's playing tanks. So the Gragas and the Ambessa game in the opener and the Renekton, take a look at all the other games. It's Poppy, K'Sante, Cho'Gath, Ornn, Cho'Gath. In terms of doing the dirty work for them to be able to put down vision and take space in situations, the preparation for Atakan and for Draken, BB does all of the work. And BB is doing well in lane matchups, is picking something that is strong in swaps. This is something that is basically filling the void that Mickey left behind. Well, left behind, he got removed from his post, right? And with that being said, something to pay attention to, but I do think that BB's pool is quite deep. I think that G2 have kind of figured out the recipe for success. I think Lavrov can be good mechanically, but I don't think he adds enough spice in terms of progressing the game, and I think this is something that G2 very much so lacked. And G2, they lost their first 2 games, one throw against BDS, one very close game against KC, and a very bad draft against Fnatic. G2 to me is still a contender for the title, and it will be tough to beat these guys in playoffs. This is still a team with a lot of winning DNA. And I think GX, in terms of their recent stint, I do think coming into week 2, they kind of lost themselves in terms of how they set things up. So if you take a look at their games here, coming into the first one, there was the full melee comp where they were still doing well because June is just mechanically super, super talented and Jackie's too. But that's the main thing about GX for me, is that GX as a team, they are mechanically super, super talented, but the consistency of their setups and the fights that they are choosing is not there for me. And I think that in the long run, the other teams like KC, Koi, and so forth are going to be simply better than them. They lost against G2. That was the game that exploded with Closer played Nidalee. And then the extension as well, the game against Fnatic. This was the one where, straight up, like Humanoid just solo killed Jackie's dry and murdered him. And that was it, They also lost a game against Vitality, where their draft was also a little bit uncharacteristic. It seems like GX lost themselves in terms of what they want to draft. I like Jackie's on the Yone. I like Jackie's on the Asylus. I like Jackie's on the Akali. But if they don't have like these skirmishing tools, I do think that their gameplay and their game pattern isn't as streamlined. And at least, they can resort back to being the team that picks Maokai, Sejuani, Vi, and makes it very simple. Because in the end, I think that's a very, very good band-aid solution for anybody. But GX is a little bit on the fraud watch. I think G2 as well. In theory, I think a 2-1 is plausible, but I think 2-0 is a more reasonable prediction from my side. Koi versus BDS, I think this could be competitive. Even though I do think Koi is better, I think the BDS have certain champions that they do well on. Like if they play Azir, maybe they play a Nocturne Orianna combo, maybe they get the Maokai action in. If we think about BDS so far, the main thing that stands out to me is I think Ice is still playing super well. I think Nuke has his champions. But that's the main thing about BDS is that they play very, very simple League of Legends. And simple League of Legends can be a very positive thing, but it leaves opportunity macro-wise to maybe dissect them. And when I think about the matchup Koi versus Giants, I do think that Koi has way higher chance of upsetting higher end teams than BDS does. But I do think that Koi's risk, their chaos in the game and how they try to squeeze situations really exposes them to a team that could play very, very safe League of Legends. So in my mind, when I think about this matchup, I think that stylistically, it's a very, very interesting one because if BDS kind of go too far in the direction of scaling and giving things up, Koi can definitely take games and explode leads. But at the same time, Koi play with a very high level of risk, so there are opportunities to throw. I think a good example, of course, is the game that Koi played against Team Heretics. Losing against Team Heretics should be unforgivable, but this definitely looked like, basically this last week, I do think that Mad Lions, Movistar Koi look exactly like they did last year. Very, very good on the early, very, very decisive, but always kind of reaching for too much and looking to win the game on every play. They looked like basically Koi from last year because Jojo Pune legit played like Frescawi. This was a very, very bad look for Jojo Pune, and we are hoping that he bounces back because he will be crucial in this matchup. If there is going to be one potential upset, I do think that this is probably the highest chance due to Koi's form in the last week. But 2 weeks to prep can be very beneficial, and I'm hoping we see a deeper layer to Mirwin as a player because that's the part of him that excites me the most when he picks his range champs and can look to just, enact the punishment because his jungler and support have a very specific style they want to play in terms of like the Broms, the Zinzaos, and the combos to fight and to contest river. I do think that gives Mirwin opportunities to do more. And maybe finally, we're going to see him in, of course, in Fearless actually do that. So there is... I think this one, in terms of like calling the shots, I do think draft will be very, very telling here because we can definitely say this is Koi comfort. They're going to dominate the game. This is BDS comfort. They can resist the Koi onslaught. I will lean towards Koi, but I think this is like a 55, 45, 60, 40, if I want to be generous, because and that's where I land. Main question for me, right, in terms of this team, I want to see more from Irrelevant, right? Irrelevant has been kind of a quiet player so far. I do think that his own game was legit. Ornn is just king of the region. Maybe that's just the way. I think that the last game they played against KC that they won when KC dropped the Nidalee draft with the Yone and the Kaiser and the Leona. I do think that this looked like BDS's best game. They had an Ornn, Zyra, Aurora. On paper looks very AP heavy, but it's not like fucking Yone is going to buy Mercs, right? So I do think that this was a very, very good step in the right direction. And I do want to commend like Striker as a coach and BDS in the previous, weeks. They are a good prep team, very, very good prep team. So I do think that this is a very, very exciting matchup. Very, very exciting matchup. I think Koi has higher potential as a team, but BDS right now, I do see, the engine kind of building up. And I think that I wouldn't be surprised if BDS take the series win here. KC versus Vitality. My main issue here is that I do think that this series will play out very similarly to, the game they played between one another. Like Vitality had a pretty good draft, but I think Vitality kind of gave away too many opportunities to come back into the game. Vitality threw a game against G2, threw a game against KC. I don't know how fast they can tighten this up because those mistakes tend to happen. Whether it's Kazi getting caught, Hilly getting caught, I am worried that these opportunities will always kind of reveal themselves to the top end teams and they will be able to take them like KC did in their match. And that part is scary for me. But on the flip side, Vitality getting in those positions is a very good thing, right? I think Linsas is doing better and better. I think Hilly is finding form slowly. Kazi is super good. Naknako is super exciting. Chaik has his champions where he does okay on. I do think Vitality, the fact that they can get in those positions is a very, very great sign. Can they, in these 2 weeks, kind of tighten up their mid to late game decision making? It's hard to say because this has been an issue for Vitality the last year. And I think that the main thing that concerns me about KC is sometimes their inconsistency in early game and also the ceiling of Targamas as a player. I do think that as KC make a deeper run into the tournament, I do think the main concern for me is plain and simple Targamas. I think that when KC and Targamas is going to be playing against the likes of Mickey, I do think the super gap will be so big. I think when KC is kind of dropping the ball, I do think that Targama's ceiling is kind of showing itself. So we're hoping that he can step up. But in terms of their solo lanes, I think Kana and Vladi are fucking insane. I think Yaikas look good. I think Kalis looks fucking fantastic too. I do think that, this is a team that has a very, very high ceiling. And I think that when things go wrong in the game, they can kind of reset the pacing. They're not playing like a team full of youngsters. They're kind of aware of the circumstance of the game and they are not kind of racing against it. They're letting things go with the flow and they wait for opportunities. This is something that my team, Roddy Sack, we struggle with. So when we're behind, we feel rushed to do the next play because we're losing, but trusting that opportunities will come and setting concrete plans on what you want to look for is something that KC evidently do super good. So I think KC is going to win this one. I think finally we can round off with a tier list. I think Fnatic right now is the number one contender. I think that in terms of individual level, Humidor looks fantastic. I think that Mickey and Razork as a jungle super duo is by far the best in the league. And I think Fnatic to not win the split would be a disappointment. I think G2 second for me, plain and simple. The engine that is BB and Caps, they are surrounded by good enough players for them to drag things to the finish line. I think a finals between G2 and Fnatic would be extremely interesting. The next team that comes to mind here is KC. I already mentioned a lot of details about them in the rundown about, of course, this matchup that they're playing against Vitality. But I think that individually they have just such a high ceiling. And I think a lot of, let's say, the things that the teams that are more established, that switch very few players, have in place, I do think that those guys are going to be, I think KC can catch up on this. I think just Vladi and Kana as solo laners is a really high fucking standard. They can contest and they can compete, play many styles. I think Yakas looked wonderful, Kalis is super good, and I think Targamas is serviceable against the teams that are below here. But if there was any concern for me still, I think Targamas, in terms of his floor, has been low in the first 9 games that they played together. Of course, I know KC fans that might listen to this, obviously we're just looking at what's happening in the server. I work with Targamas. I understand the intangibles that he brings to the table. I'm just looking at what is happening in the server because, it would be unfair to measure intangibles as well in terms of, performance, because in the end, it's like, I don't know the intangibles of everybody else. Right? It's like on every single team. It's like, I know people on G2. I know how Caps works. I know how BB works. He's a friend. I know, of course, everybody on Fnatic except Oscarini, so forth. Nevertheless. Now the tricky one, right, between Koi and Giants. I do think that I worry about the identity crisis that Giants is kind of facing in the last 2 weeks of LEC. I think that Koi have really practiced that one kick 1,000 times, which makes them dangerous. I think that between these two teams, I definitely think that there is, there is definitely parity. I would say that I feel very, very sold on everything above here. But in regards to these two, I think it's very, very close. I think the Giants is mechanically better than Koi, but I do think that Koi can sharpen their identity better in the short term. So it's just a question of, it's just a question of which one do you prefer. So in this moment, I'm going to lean a little bit towards Koi. They have that experience together, and that's it. Koi, Casey, in my opinion, someone wrote in the chat, Mib is doing great and both is consistent. They play good together as a team. I really think that their final weekend here really put a damper on things, bro. Like, our final weekend looked horrible. That looked really, really bad, and I think this was just not good, man. This is not good. But I do think that Koi as a team, still, I've said, I think that they have very good team play, very good team identity, but I do think that, it is what it is. Casey lost to BDS though. Yeah, but it's the context of the losses, right? The context of the losses. If we think about the BDS win, is like, this was the final game of the season where Casey dropped a Nidalee draft, right? And that's it. They dropped a Nidalee draft, a very difficult draft to play. We don't want to see Nidalee in fucking Europe, right? So the context of the loss still matters. Like, I remember those games that Movistar Koi played, and I think that Jojo Pyun just looked awful on Jace, Yeah, I like, for example, I was saying always, it's like, I contextualize G2 losses to the state, like the G2 losses didn't worry me that much. I was unwavering in my thought surrounding, of course, G2 in terms of how far they would go. And then we have two more teams to place. I think Team Heretics is an obvious last, and then Vitality BDS. It's just a question of, like, what is your flavor, guys? What is your flavor? It's like, do you like the safe? It's like the turtle and the hare as well. The turtle and the hare. It's like, this is a team that can play fast and loose and crazy, but they're gonna make a lot of silly mistakes. While BDS is just a slow-moving mountain. And currently, my gut is telling me a little bit more in the Vitality direction, But I do think that BDS is very lucky that they get Koi as the matchup, because I think BDS would get slaughtered by these teams, slaughtered. While I think Koi has a way better chance than BDS against them. It's just something that is very matchup specific. All right. In my next video, guys, or my next breakdown, we're going to talk about, like, the top individual performance. We're going to do a top 3 in each position. I'll be live viewing all of the games. Playoffs is super fucking interesting, so we can't miss that. I wish you guys all the best, and I'll catch you guys on the next stream.